I don't know if anybody can hear me. I was just told by YouTube that I have an unsupported resolution, which is the resolution I've been using all along. Okay, there I am. Okay, so I'm assuming everybody can hear me. And I will be changing my resolution this next week because I'll have better internet support. So hello everybody. It's funny, somebody, Madfinger, had used the term 5-5 to me last night. And what does that mean? And apparently it's something, he said it was something from old CB radio. So, for the people who I can see here, hello Madfinger and 9 Eland and Meandering Mystic. So, it is certainly my wish and desire that all have been doing well. But that's kind of what we're going to speak a little bit about tonight. Because, you know, I have conversations with a lot of people, a fair amount, let's put it that way, because the word "a lot" isn't exactly a concise definition. In the pipe. Okay. Well, I don't know about in the pipe, but I will roll myself a cigarette. John Lash. Hello, Deborah. John Lash put out I'm going to say it that way, finally put out a new radio guy in him. Although, I mean, it's not frustratingly so. It's just that, you know, we waited and finally we got one. He's very busy with Nemeta. Oh, hello, Patricia. Okay, so hello, Patricia and Deborah. MC Winzard. That's an interesting name. And I definitely read your comment. And again, for me, that's the answer I got. It doesn't, to me, I didn't ask for the history. I asked what it meant. Hello, Soul Traveler. I always appreciate your comments that you leave. Always very, very nice. I don't like the word nice so much. Very pleasant comments. Hello, Raksha Moose. So tonight's title is about the dreaming. Dreaming a better world. And in this case, the word dreaming is used with I'm going to call it the Gnostic meaning, or at least the telestic meaning those who are aimed. Oh, looks like I rolled my cigarette in the wrong direction. It's really, cigarettes don't hold together very well unless you grab that gummed edge. So while it's still moist, and it's been a cool day here in Virginia. Never really got out of the 70s and was in the low 70s for a big part of the day. I have a feeling this cigarette I'm rolling is going to be a huge fail. And it got tobacco all over the gummy stuff, but it'll probably be good for a couple of pulls on the medicine plant. So yes, in Gnostic or Telestic parlance, the dreaming is the agency of Mother Earth, Gaia Sophia, planetary animal mother, plenary sovereign intelligence, and another one. She's got lots of names, and it works like that. We don't need it. Many names are usually part of being someone with a certain amount of importance, and I do believe that the creator and sustainer of life on this planet is an entity of some importance. Hello, RC. Okay, so I'm just really glad that I called my internet provider people today. It was a little late in the day, so I wasn't able to kind of get my new doubled speed, 6 megabytes, to be in place for this stream, but they will be for future streams. As long as well as a slightly larger internet bill, but you kind of gets what you pay for. So I'm going to go a little slowly because I'm kind of spent a fair amount of a day in the dreaming, and I spend as much time in the dreaming as I can remind myself. I mean, we're always in her dreaming, but there's also like kind of consciously being aware of that, and how that really adjusts things. Very often I'm reminded to enter the dreaming when something is frustrating me, and it could be as simple as washing dishes and getting soap on myself, or pouring something and spilling it, or whatever. And as soon as I enter the dreaming, as soon as I say I'm in the dreaming, everything starts to fix. Everything immediately adjusts. And with the change in my environment, having the house to myself, all the possibilities that it opens up, but also the immediate reality that it created was a peaceful household, my ability to come out of my little corner in the cupboards and use all the cupboards and take things out of the basement, have use of a living room, set up the other extra bedroom for a place I can do my shiatsu, body work, hooking up with people who will be promoting that, feeling, because now the backyard is my own, also getting out there and getting things planted. What did I plant? I planted kale. I think that was 2 days ago. And then today I planted zucchini. And I'm going to look around and see what the seeds I have. And I think since the full moon is not for a few more days, I could get out and get myself some corn to plant. And which would be good to grow around the zucchini, because corn, it is kind of like the three sisters in Native American tradition. It would be a squash, corn, and a bean. And then once the moon starts to wane, I will plant my carrots and my beets. And I was looking at them, and they're currently energizing under a pyramid. And I was looking at them, they're both heritage. And then I found that I don't recall when I bought the carrots, that these are like kind of stumpier carrots. They're chubbier and not as long. ideal, and which makes them ideal for highly compacted soils. And the soil in this part of Virginia is just some of the best clay. I actually had taken a clump of clay the other day, and it had no other plant material. It was pure clay, and I was able to mold it in my hands. And then I tried to add a little more clay to it, and it had material, and it ruined the whole ball. This one ball of clay I had was just flawless. And I wish I'm going to try and do that again, because I want to press it out and maybe put a rune on it and then sun bake it. Maybe the next, or maybe even decide to cook up that other batch of or Yukon Gold organic French fries that you put in the oven, and maybe throw it in there and bake it up a little bit. Yeah, growing things is a pretty darn good addiction. And you don't have to, in winter you can bring things inside. I think a lot more people are starting to get into gardens if they can. It's just so good to work with the soil, the scents, and also with my very compacted clay soil. Fortunately, I've been pulling out my compost, although it's we just had some rain, so the compost is a little moister than it might ideally be. Hello, Jet Pet. And but anyway, I took some of it and broke it up in my hands and kind of mixed it in with the clay, and where I put the seeds in, I put a little hole, put a little bit of compost in there, put the seed in, and then cover it over with a compost clay mixture. So I think things. Actually last year I did a little garden, and it went very well. The only thing that didn't do so well was the beets, because I put the kale on the southeast side of the beets, and the beets were starved for sun. So this year I planned out, and so I'm putting the kale in the middle, and I'm putting the zucchinis behind that, because zucchinis, will have sufficient sun, and then I'm going to put my root vegetables where they can get the most sun. And so maybe I'll get some carrots and beets, which I intend to juice. Carrots for the vitamin A, and because they taste delicious, and beets for the iron. And when I plant my beets, I put a little bit of just regular old-fashioned steel wool, the kind of stuff that has no soap in it. And that'll provide the iron in the soil, into the clay-like soil, for the beets to just put inside themselves. And of course, reminding myself, even as I'm going around, and to me, working in the earth is a pretty earth-connecting thing to do, but say, okay, we're going to garden in the dreaming. So the dreaming, when I kind of took a look at how things developed for me, the freedom, how rather than waiting for the end of the month when their rent my roommate's rent would have run out, left out, they were able to get into the house early. And so I, in many ways, got to pay only a third of a rent for almost a half a month of having the house to myself. And even though they're good people, they, had different habits than myself, and it was a little crowded. So just the adjustments that just happened to me, and the global mission of peace coming through for me to make sure that the first of the month, which is rapidly approaching, is not one that I will have to sweat. More creativity will be required for me next month, but all that's in process. And so I just basically counting my blessings. And when I looked at the blessing, I mean, I've had nice blessings, but this kind of blessing was almost like having a mother do all kinds of great things for you. Things that you might have thought but didn't even think to ask, or even and at a level that you didn't even think was possible. Like, gee, I'd like my roommates to leave the house half a month early, and even though they have paid a rent for a full month. I wouldn't have thought of that. but someone did and gave it to me. And even when we have to deal with the challenges, they're kind of part of being human, some challenge. That the challenges are just not insurmountable, not spirit crushing, and so I tend to dialogue more frequently with people who are kind of who are basically have embraced living in the dreaming. You know, we have our pet names for Mama, but Mama is a big part of, is a center in many ways of the conversation. The influence of the lunar cycles, what they presage when they first show up, and then also kind of how they are delivered. But I find that those of my acquaintances and friends and even closer, brothers in spirit and clan, that life is going fairly well for them also. Again, fairly well. Where improvement and expansion is very much a part of what they're experiencing. And to a person, it seems that those who are aware of the dreaming, aware of presencing themselves in it, seem to be having really good effects. Hello, Oswald. So as this, the center of what is called gnosis is to have knowledge of something that you experience. And the experience of the concept of the dreaming has been very profound for myself and for others who I comparing notes with. So I invite all to enter into that dreaming. Of course, one would have to be working with Mother Earth as who's the center of our, let's put it this way, our creator and our sustainer at the local level. Gnostics are pretty clear that there's a difference between local and then galactic. Because at the galactic level, we have the pleroma and the originator, and all the good aeons there. But then we have the anomaly that happened, and we are part of that anomalous occurrence in our galaxy, where one of the aeons took such an interest in what wasn't working out well that she broke off and ended up in our part of the galactic arms, turned herself into a planet. Once she was capable of life, got a fresh injection of panspermia from the pleroma, and here we are. And of course, the other consequence of her doing something that other aeons had never done, or at least not in our galaxy, and that when she landed, she splattered a bit, and some of that splatter didn't turn out so well. That's where we get the demiurge and the archons. They are in many ways, we're related, in that we have the same mother. And that's something that I think that often isn't known to those who do not do planetary tantra. There are many people speaking of the archons. You can put archons in and you probably get more You'll get a fair amount of John Lash, but you'll get plenty of others. And if I listen to their description of the archons, I feel like I'm listening to science fiction. The archons are part of our creation story, or at least part of the solar system creation story. And if you don't have that context, you really cannot understand either the archons or the demiurge and their interference on our planet, and the envy that drives that interference. Which is why sometimes when the topic of evil arises, I say that evil is what humans do. There is no existential evil. There is existential jealousy and envy, and that works. And that is those are very twisted emotions, and that's what the archons and the demiurge feel for creation, for the earth and its creations. And I guess you could say that might manifest it into something resembling hate. But it's just kind of, I guess if I were them, I might be envious also. But I'm not. I'm human. So I certainly have the compassion, but they can only be what they can be, which is trouble, if you work with them. And unfortunately for us, the great religions of the West have the demiurge as their creator, or that's what they were told, and they bought that bill of goods. And it has it, and we see the world, not the planet, the world. So the world that we live in is an archontic world. Wasn't always archontic, but in the last couple of 100 years, it has been greatly increased. And that's also why I will have to, in the course of even going in the conversations I have from my Gnostic seat, talk about what is gaining more and more traction, and that is our falsified chronology and history, and how much of what is probably only a couple to a few hundred years old in history has been made to look like it was thousands of years old, because if people were aware of how fucked up the world became and how quickly, in terms of centuries, they might be re-energized and go, wait a second, this practically happened only a few generations ago. We can get this back. But when it seems like it happened, like it's always been this way, then that creates a predisposition in our psychology. So that's kind of the world that we are currently operating in on this very beautiful planet. And as I might have said before, I remember one time in an introduction to one of his shows on Aeon Gnostic Bite, Miguel Connor spoke about being on this crappy little planet. And it's just like, how does somebody who might call themselves a Gnostic refer to this as a crappy little planet? Oh, that's right, they're probably pulling all of their Gnostic stuff from the Nag Hammadi texts and taking them as if the texts in their entirety and as they are composed are in fact represent Gnostic thought or the Sophianic narrative. And so if you can utter the words crappy little planet to refer to Gaia, clearly your Gnostic texts have served you poorly, and that would be the Nag Hammadi texts. And it was in recognition of the mess that they were that John Lamb Lash set out on a multi-decade quest to retrieve the actual narrative, or to restore the narrative. John Lash put out a video today on his Mandela Effect Decoded, and also I'm quite sure is mirrored on Hans Carlson and his YouTube channel, and Ginny Thwaite, about why people seem to like the Gnostic restoration, or the Sophianic restoration that John Lamb Lash did. And it's because it connects you. It allows you to realize and to live on a beautiful planet, where if you chase other corrupted forms, like you will find in as far as the mishmash in the Nag Hammadi texts, then you'll find people calling themselves Gnostics and referring to a crappy little planet. Yeah, of course, Miguel does enjoy holding himself out as a heretic, and heretic comes from the Greek word heresis, or hereses, meaning to choose. And on with the Anthropos and within the dreaming, choice, of course, is one's option. In the Jehovian religions, choice becomes, or the word heresy becomes, punishable by death. And, well, that just kind of lets us know what to avoid, one would hope. Excuse me. So it's very interesting, kind of coming out of a very beautiful, pretty, lots of bliss. I wouldn't say, nonstop bliss, but very enjoyable world, both outer and inner. And then trying to kind of get into. And then try to get into a place of communication. Kind of come out of that altered state. At least come out of it enough to be able to attempt a conversation here. Hello, Sarath. So that's what that's certainly what I'm attempting to do. But the dreaming. And it's really interesting because they're within New Age conversations, alternative conversations, there's much about, simulations and holograms and whatever. And simulation is a poor word, because a simulation is always in other words, there has to be something real to simulate. So if we were living in a simulation, where's the real thing hidden? No, we're not in a simulation. We are, but I do believe in the dreaming. The dreaming is a holographic environment. So it's not a really big. It's not a big reach, nor a long step, to really kind of take some of those ideas that are very much entertained and say, and then just make that about Sophia's dreaming and saying, okay, let's wake up to it, because that's where the nightmare is not occurring. And the world, not the planet, the world currently is nightmarish. And I have found it myself personally, and again with people that I, check in with, compare notes with. Because a big part of planetary Tantra is to engage our Gnostic shamanic aspects of ourselves. So, I do shamanic journeying, but one of the things I like to do with my shamanic journeying is share that with a shaman and other people who are doing shamanic journeying, comparing notes, and how much that enriches all of us. And comparing notes with people who are working more and more within the dreaming, the feedback is that it works. It works, and it would be really, it's working so well that, this is going in and out of it. But it seems like the more time spent being present and conscious of being in the dreaming, of basically acknowledging Sophia, acknowledging Mother Earth, acknowledging the planetary animal mother in real time, that she's holding the space, she's holding this, and that you're entering it into that space with her. That changes the physics of your immediate environment. Having trouble threading a needle? Oh, then remember you're into dreaming? And watch that thread go right through that little teeny eye really quickly. Life is better with Mama, and presencing her. A little progress report. I am not coming out of my altered state quite as much as I might like to, so I just have to maybe deal with it and hope, and just I don't like the word hope, and just desire that this works. Max Egan put out a really, really good video about the alternative chronology. And what's kind of really helpful with Max Egan, and that's the Crow House. His YouTube channel is the Crow House. If you put that into your YouTube search engine, you'll come up with it. And it was the last video he put out. I think it was piecing together his history or something like that. And one of the reasons is, he doesn't speak, he speaks English with an Australian accent as opposed to a Bulgarian accent. And apparently some people do not enjoy listening to Sylvie Ivanova, either the tone of her voice or the fact that her Bulgarian accent makes words a little more difficult to recognize. But Max also puts it into his own language and perspective. And Max has for years been telling people about the kakistocracy, or basically the shit rulers of the world, which happens to take place on our beautiful planet. And you might have noticed that the kakistocracy does seem to be trying to trash the planet in as many ways as possible. And that's because they're aligned with the demiurge, and the envy and jealousy and the hate manifests in how they conduct business. So Max is basically saying, if we just turn our back on the system in mass, the system would collapse, and he's correct. But there were, I won't even get into all the blockages, because it's really not necessarily for someone on the outside to identify the blockages within people. Blockages are part of the inner work, and inner work is for people to initiate on their own and ask for assistance if they can imagine that somebody might be able to assist them in that process. A clue for anybody who wants to do inner work, who might assist you? Well, look around and look at somebody who seems to. I guess probably the biggest hint is somebody who's not being victimized, doesn't use the language of "woe is me," and isn't pointing fingers at them all the time. I mean, there's a certain amount of identifying problems. Hello, Niche. There's a certain amount we need to identify problems, but once problems are identified, then it's solution time. Not, okay, we've identified the problem, so that'll be who we point our finger at all the time. That's not part of why a problem is identified. Problems are identified to be solved. So Max has been giving people Max Egan has been giving people the tools of how to disengage, and how that it's kind of like we're all standing on a platform, and there's a politician on the end of a platform hanging over a cliff, and if we just step off the platform, the politician falls into the abyss. But again, there are a lot of fears, and people tend to think short term. Like, oh, there might be a little bit of discomfort in the short term. Yeah, there might be. Kind of like pulling off a bandage. But lately he's turning his because he's getting, apparently he's doing research. People are sending him things. And like anybody who does inner work and a certain amount of shamanic journeying, and Max has done ayahuasca a number of times. But once you do, if you have used that as a tool and not as a form of entertainment or curiosity, you have learned that landscape, and you can access that landscape through desiring to access it. So he speaks about his downloads. So he's also getting a lot of information, like I do when I consider things. And so I think that Max will be sharing a lot more about the alternative history. It seems to be like where he has found a new passion, and I think that's a great thing, because he's a very good communicator, and he tends to pick a little slice at a time and then just really deliver on it. So I'm very happy where Max is going, and he will be somebody I will probably be linking to regularly when I start my streams about the alternative history, or about the false history and the false chronology. Yeah, Max. But I mean, I have to admit, when Max is, it's really refreshing for me, because I really love Max, and he's a Skype contact of mine. I don't bug him much. He's a busy man. Unless I have something important to say to people, who do things like Max, or even John Lash. I don't bug them with, little things. I told John, I did tell John that I had much love for him today in a little Skype message, because I had just watched his latest video, and I like to let him know that there are Rome out there, or Gnostics, that have great affection for him. So how has, I'm going to put a question out early on because I think it might spark a conversation. We're going through a lot lately, and how are people doing out there? Do you feel you're experiencing the world improving and your own life improving with it? Or are you experiencing something different? Well, Nation, not only did I kind of come into the stream in a slightly altered state when I was lighting the incense and, doing my communications in preparation for the show, I kind of gave a lot of permissions, a lot of access, and so I'm sitting in that place. I'm really enjoying. I'm enjoying the productivity of the content and context creators in our community. Niche is one of them. By the way, Niche, I did see your latest one you put out today. Maybe you want to get. If I had some money, I'd get on Amazon and price some good quality woodworking things. Because to buy, when it comes to tools, if you don't buy really good quality, it's a joke, and it's a bad joke actually. There really is a lot of economy tools on the market. Are they garbage? They really are garbage. I find made in the USA is still a good indication that you will get something respectable. Made in Korea is usually fairly respectable. Made in Japan is fairly respectable. Made in Germany, oh yeah. And we can maybe mention a few others, but if I've left out countries, it's not because they couldn't make the list. I'm just leaving them out. "2 years alone in a trailer in Oregon." That sounds a little bit like paradise. And I picked the word paradise because it has an earthly connotation to it. I purposely am avoiding the word heaven. Heaven is part of a mythos. And in my case, a rejected mythos, because it goes with hell. And again, it's got Sky Father and angels, and I mean it's goofy. It's childish. German wood tools, yes. It was interesting because when I heard the echoing, I said, "Oh, she must be using an echo." I mean, I have a guitar echo that I could always use, but I also have an old Yamaha analog, like rack mounting echo. I bought it probably in 1984, and that's when things were built to hang around for a while, and it certainly has hung around. And so it was just kind of interesting to hear. And then also, just like you were, it was like, you can set them where the initial, let's call it the dry signal or the original signal, and then the echo signal have the same volume, or you can put it where the initial signal has a greater volume than the echoed signal. Hello, Jorge and Pyramid 7. Welcome to Can't You Hear Me Gnostic. And so I was just, it's just interesting as that voice effect was happening for Unish. I was just, my head went into gear. And I do enjoy gear, which is why I will be doing Mystic Muses also. And I spoke to Weber Speakers. I said, I want to use your thumbnail from the front of from your front page. Do I have your permission? Is that okay? You comfortable with that? And he said, by all means, please do. So that will be the thumbnail. I might embellish it with a few other original things, but I really want to make I want to promote Weber Speakers. Today on Instagram, they had a sound clip of somebody who had put a Legacy, that's kind of actually their least expensive speaker, a Legacy 12 into their twin reverb, and when I heard the playback, you could tell it was Weber because it was just so dreamy. And when they ended, they let the last note kind of drone on, and it's just the same reason why when I play in my room, I let my notes drone on, because between the quality of my instrument and the Weber speaker reproducing it, it's just beautiful. The overtones that go with it. Weber speakers are the speaker, and they're handmade. With the exception, even their signature ones, but they make the signature ones only have one configuration, where most of the other speakers have a few power configurations. Sometimes only two, but in some cases up to 5. Ohmage differences, cones. Some are offered in hemp. Some are offered in hemp and paper, and hemp cones are the bomb. As a matter of fact, the representative at Weber calls me their primary Weber hemp cone speaker enthusiast and promoter. So if I ever do, I might even, if I ever get a little extra money, I can get a new speaker. I'm going to ask them to please remember my promotions and maybe treat me a little kinder, as kindly as they can, if it's doable. Jorge plays guitar too. Hemp cone. I have noticed that you have come on with your sense of humor on full tonight, Madfinger, and that's working. Okay, RC, take care of yourself. Be well. Anyway, so I was commenting. So I had mentioned that Nish had done a video today, and Sarath, the mage, has also been doing live streams, like a lot of us. It's kind of your video. I made hundreds of videos just talking to a camera, and then started live streaming some months ago. And now, basically, all of my context and content is in a form of live streaming. I might do some singular song or 2-song videos that I will, put in the can and then upload. But my upload should be going quicker when as of tomorrow, because I will have doubled my internet speed, and I'm looking forward to experiencing a little more zip in my internet usage. And of course, there's Meandering Mystic, and as from sitting in my mystic seat, I acknowledge Meandering Mystic as a true mystic. And let's see. And of course, as we know, the Moose Lodge is closed, so there will not be any more mystic and mooses or dangerous discussions. But others will have to step up to provide context and content in that. And like I said, Meandering Mystic puts out, I think, just really beautiful videos. One of my favorite things is sometimes after a stream, and I just kind of looking for something to, something else, you know, a voice other than the ones that occur inside my head, but a soothing, meaningful place. And if he has put out a video that day that I haven't watched, that is always the first place I go. Go to Meandering Mystic and allow him to share his experience, his mystic experience of the dreaming and the animal medicine. I just listen to music, Jorge. Styles of music are too any one style is way too limited for myself. I don't play in one style. I write and play in various styles. So again, for me, styles and genres are not a I mean, we naturally will create, you know, music by our influences. But the whole idea that we think in styles or genres, that's something that marketing people came up with. And woe to the artist that identifies as a genre and gets a recording contract. Because the people with the money will be defining what that style is, what that genre looks like. Well, Niche is still on. Niche is on. You can catch Niche every weekend on Wednesday, basically at the same time that I start this show, which is 9 p.m. Eastern time. Her and Jerry do Nox Mente just about every week. So you won't be you don't have to miss Niche. You'll have a fair amount of Niche, and then Niche spoke with Emily Moyer. On the Off Planet Radio YouTube channel, and that was, the two ladies really made some good word magic there. So if you have not listened to Niche engaging with Emily Moyer, it's only been up about 2 or 3 weeks. I encourage you to go listen to that conversation. Yeah, I haven't had a chance to listen to, you know, often, see, on Wednesdays, I have my Global Mission of Peace gig, and on Thursdays as well. But the Wednesday run runs a little bit longer. And very often, because, you know, and I'm the moderator there, and, you know, 20 or more people show up, and great people. And again, that's why, it's because of them that I have been able to meet my rent before having done anything even yet on YouTube or having gotten any clients in yet. Those people took care of me. I put the call out to them, and they made sure that I could keep a roof over my head and without any sphincter clenching. And so very often what happens is, about an hour after I disengage, I need to kind of nap and reset. And then I forget all about the last 2 weeks. I've forgotten all about the show, and so I will endeavor to correct that. Yeah, the Higher Side chat. I like Greg Carlwood. He has guests on that really I don't like, but that's somebody I don't like might be somebody's favorite. So so I think one of the reasons he's as successful as he is because he kind of has his show open to many voices, And so if he has somebody on, sometimes I don't, I'm not that familiar with somebody. I'll start it, and they're going down a road, and it's just like, you're bugging me, dude, or ma'am, or dudette, and I'll tune out. And I don't tune out, and I don't need to give it. I don't give it a thumbs down. I don't leave a comment. Oh, what a shitty guest, because it's not. It's I don't like a guest. That doesn't make the guest shitty. It means I didn't like them. That's all it means. And all I have to do is hit pause, close the window, and my torture is over. Yeah, I try to use the hearts. I like what Nisha's saying. I mean, when I greet everybody, I use a heart. When I say goodnight, I use a heart. But then when, I greet individuals, depending on who they are, I might use an owl, I might use a grin, I might use a heart. There are some people I always have a heart on for, but we won't go there. It was really interesting with the temperature being so low. I mean, I kind of did my shampoo about the regular time I often do, a little bit, an hour or so before the show. And it didn't, because it wasn't as warm out, it didn't dry as quickly. But ew. Oh. Okay. Sometimes the chat can be rather uplifting. And the other thing, I've been really eating well since I have the kitchen to myself. I've had friends who've been visiting me and bringing me these packets, these 1 pound packets of dried beans, chili beans, but there's one of my other favorites is the 14 bean mix. Has lentils in it too. And so now I'm just able to cook up, go in there, doesn't matter what time of the day or night. And I, it takes about two hours or so, because I like my beans to be nice and soft. I don't like al dente beans. I like them just being shy of mushy. So I have to cook them for a while, and I'm able to cook up that big pot of beans, and it feeds me for 3 days. And they buy me all the good stuff, bring me diced organic tomatoes, and the beans are organic. Again, anybody who knows me knows, bring me organic or please don't bring it to me. Because it's, the materials you use to build your body, the quality of the material that goes into your mouth and then is used to replace the dying cells in your body. You really, especially, I'm 65. I want good replacement cells. And so I've been eating the way I've been eating for almost 30 years now, and it has treated me very well. And I'm hoping to be gaining some weight. When my roommates left, they took the scale that they brought into the house, so I have no idea what my current weight is, but it seems like I'm gaining weight, and I need to gain. I'd like to gain about 20 pounds if I don't, in my current semi-sedentary lifestyle, because that would bring me up to 170. But if I were to get unsedentary at 180, then I look real good. I mean, even, I agree with you, Oswald. The Monsanto grown food is probably one of the most, if not the most archontic thing that we're encountering. But I remember years ago, when I was still in Woodstock, probably was only into my first couple of years of an organic vegetarian diet. And somebody had asked me, how do I think it's a good cause? How do I find the money to buy exclusively organic? I said, well, I don't go to the doctor, ever. That saves money. And so that savings I put into my food, because actually it's that food that is giving me that savings in the first place. I also believe, putting good food into your body also allows your mind to be clearer. And so, because, health isn't all about diet. As a body worker, I put my hands on people and their body talks to me. And a lot of times, what the body is telling me is the psychology, that is, the person riding the body, the personality, the persona, the ego structure that's in the body is the reason why the body's not doing well. And a lot of it, and of course, some of our psychology also informs what and how we eat. So it's kind of like a good diet is not only what we consume through our mouths, but what we consume into our psyche. So I'm pretty cautious about what I feed my psyche, which is why there's there are a lot of topics on the internet that I really can't. When people, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? It's like, I'm sorry, that's in the shit food category. Don't go there. I don't go there. There's plenty of stuff in the alternative community that qualifies as, the equivalent of fast food. Yes. At my age, I'm entitled to Medicare. I'm not going to sign up for it. First of all, I don't need it. I don't care to have anybody poking around me, and I don't want the paperwork trail. The moment you show up, they give you something here. Start writing. Fuck off. Yeah, biodynamic, Julie. Welcome, Julie, by the way. Biodynamic is the in my opinion, and because I've read Rudolf Steiner, but especially the biodynamic. When I read the biodynamic, not only the practice, but the theory, I went, this is it. This is that you really cannot get a more, I'm going to use the word evolved form of organic farming other than biodynamic. And even, and you can do biodynamic in many, you can do a lot of biodynamic practices without the BD preparations. Anybody who's done biodynamic knows BD stands for biodynamic. And there are preparations for the soil that are made from taking yarrow flowers and putting them in a cow's horn and then burying it in the fall and letting it winter, and then taking the compost out in the springtime and using a teaspoon of that in like 3 gallons of water, and then spraying that on the plants themselves instead of hauling around hundreds of pounds of manure. And we can address the 8th sphere a little bit. I find that actually quite archontically intriguing. And so, you can follow biodynamic, a lot of biodynamic theory, because another part of the biodynamic theory is whether or not what it is you want to harvest. Or do you want to, in some cases you actually want to grow flowers because the flower is the end result you want. But as opposed to, with fruits, which first come, or even vegetables, first comes a flower and then comes the fruit or vegetable. Or if you're growing a root, or if you're growing something like kale or a lettuce, which is leaves. So based on whether you're growing a root, a fruit, a flower, or a leaf, they would fall into one of the 4 categories of earth, fire, air, and water. And so, and then what you're doing is you're using the moon, because as the moon goes through its signs, it will transit, earth signs, air signs. And so if you're want to put the proper imprint. Again, you can ignore this. Obviously, you can ignore planting on full moon and versus, planting on rising moon versus waning moon, because there are strategies for that. That's why they used to be on the old calendars. I mean, you can ignore all that, and you still will get a yield. But these are for optimal yields and optimal nutrition. And so with biodynamic, you time what you, now, like old-fashioned gardening, non-biodynamic, if you're going to grow something that's the roots, like if you're going to grow beets and carrots, like I want to grow beets and carrots, I'm waiting for the full moon to come, because it's on the falling moon that you want that kind of pulling down energy, that you plant things that largely are going to be, you're harvesting the root. So the old-fashioned thing, if it grows up, you plant on a rising moon. If what you want is what grows down, you do it on a waning moon. So I'm waiting for this Friday is the new moon, and I'll probably next Monday, on a moon day, I will plant my carrots and my beets. But in biodynamic, in the case of roots, which I believe correspond to Earth, then you would try to find a time in that down cycle where it was in ideally Taurus, but also you could consider Capricorn or Virgo. The thing is, Taurus, in old planting, Taurus was the most fertile of them. Capricorn's considered a little barren. Virgo is also considered a little barren for earth signs. Taurus is the juicy earth sign for planting. But it seemed to me that within the biodynamic theory, if I recall correctly, they did have optimal, Taurus would be optimal, but if you got to get it in there and it's a root and it is Earth, then one of the three earth signs would be what you would want the moon to be in on a waning moon when you did that. So this is kind of just a little bit of what's going on with there. The biodynamic preparations are a whole other thing. They have another one that's made from crushed quartz, and that's for spraying on leaves, and that supposedly enables them to make better use of the sun. So biodynamic is really the one that's most in tune with the woo-woo, and also the one that kind of actually produces the most, in many ways, could be backed up scientifically, especially if you want to analyze what you end up with. Yeah. And that's the whole thing. I mean, I like to know the various theories, because there is a certain mixing and matching. I mean, when people, like with my body work, and they ask me, what style do I do? I'm educated, and it's actually kind of, a natural skill of mine. So even with shiatsu, which is largely the stimulation of the meridians, according to, the same thing, it's the theory of shiatsu is the same as traditional Chinese medicine, or TCM for short. And so it's based on the fact that there's meridians in the body. There's 5 elements in the traditional Chinese medicine, because in addition to the 4 we know, they also have wood, which in many ways corresponds with ether. And but like when I do my shiatsu, which very often is, again, you working either adding energy or dispersing energy along the meridians, whether it seems to be jitsu, which means full, or actually kind of over full, or kyo, which means low or empty, or in need of juice. And then of course there's also the flow of the meridians. Some meridians come up the body and flow towards the sky, and other ones come from the sky and flow back to the earth. The yin and yang. Yang seeks yin, and yin seeks yang. So there's that whole directional thing, and usually that's when you are moving your hand along a meridian, you will move in the direction of the meridian from its start point to where it's going to leave the body. So that's basic shiatsu. But then again, I'm also a medical massage therapist. And medical massage is very much about understanding the qualities of tissue, muscle tissue and fascia. And fascia has many forms in the body. It's not just the white stuff that you see wrapped around muscle. When I'm talking about the white stuff that isn't fat. There are all kinds of fascia in the body. But one of the primary things about all things in the body is they need moisture. And a lot of pain in the body is from fascia getting dried out and stuck. So there's certain ways of moving that around, rehydrating it. And once it's rehydrated, much of the pain or discomfort being reported to your nervous system, to your central nervous system, by nerves that are in this tissue that is dry and kind of hard and nasty, and they're letting you know one way or the other. So hydration is one of them, but sometimes if you get too dehydrated, the muscle actually doesn't even pick up the moisture that's now available to it. It's almost closed down. So you have to kind of gently roll that tissue and get it to drink again. And then once it rehydrates, the nerves that are in there that have been reporting, this is a nasty environment for us. And if it's nasty for us, that means that ill health can result from this. So once you improve the environment the nerves run through, generally they'll give you a good report. So when I'm palpating meridians, this is coming from styles of music. By the way, this is me riffing on that direction. So when I'm palpating meridians that run through tissue, very often, sometimes it seems to me that although there's a blockage in the meridian, which will affect the organ it corresponds with, that in fact that the reason that there's a little bit of a problem with the meridian isn't the organ, it's the tissue the meridian is running through. So when I'm working with meridians, I'm also checking the tissue that the meridians will be coursing through. And then very often, rather than applying a bunch of pressure to a hard spot or a ton of chi into a soft spot, one of the things I'll do is loosen up the tissue and see whether or not that just restores the flow all by itself. And very many times it does. Not only that, it's a little more pleasant for people who to receive that kind of tissue manipulation as opposed to either the almost static holding your palm over a meridian as you pump chi into it, and the shiatsu would be called ki because that's what they call chi in Japanese. And so there's like, kind of where you're just holding there, and sometimes there's a little pumping action that goes with that. Or when you find a hard or spot that's called jitsu or blocked, and then you kind of use your thumb and you're spinning around in there, and sometimes that can create a little discomfort. And so right now, so here we go. Here we are practicing shiatsu that has a whole theory to it, and a big part of it is not tissue manipulation as we do it in normal kind of body work, and especially medical massage. Hello, Sandy. So so there's another style in there. Okay, we'll call it Swedish just for the hell of it. So into my shiatsu, I incorporate some Swedish. Actually, it's more like radish. But that's actually a joke of mine. Do you do Swedish? No, I do radish. But there's another thing that's involved, and that, see, there's a form of energy work called polarity therapy, and this is based on polarities within the body. And one of the ways, it doesn't have to be your dominant hand is the positive hand, and what's left is the one that you use as kind of like the negative ground. You can switch them up, but generally I do switch them up sometimes. I will make my right hand my power hand, my flow hand, and then turn my left hand into my receiving hand. So then if I have a meridian that's flowing a certain way, let's say it's flowing up the leg, then I would put my right hand on the lower part of the meridian and my left hand on the higher part of the meridian and run some energy in a polarity fashion based on the flow of the meridian. So now I've incorporated two other styles into my shiatsu. Shiatsu theory, tissue manipulation theory, and polarity theory. I'm using them all at once. And then to my polarity or meridian, I add color therapy. So let's say I'm working on the stomach meridian. Okay, stomach, pancreas, and spleen belong to earth. Earth, the color for earth in the system is yellow. So when I'm doing the combination of, first of all, using a polarity concept to pump my ki or chi through, I color the chi. So if I'm working on an earth meridian, I will use yellow chi. If I'm working on a water meridian, I'll use a dark blue chi. If I'm working on a wood meridian, I use green chi. So this is a case in point of, because of the various disciplines and theories I've been exposed to, when I do shiatsu, I'm combining tissue manipulation, polarity therapy, and color therapy all into one modality. So that's why, when somebody asks me, what style of music do I play? I play music. Just like, what style of body work do? I do body work. What am I influenced by? Well, I'm influenced by shiatsu. I'm influenced by craniosacral. I'm influenced by polarity, by Swedish, by color therapy, and so they all find their way into one happy synthesis. Similarly, I grew up on, I grew up, or I was inspired to become a musician by the English invasion. So, and that's a blues-based rock. In other words, the blues-based rock usually has a rhythm that you can move your hips to. Which is one of the reasons why it is as good a band as they were. The Moody Blues were a little unjungle for me. Really good musicians, very good melodies, but it's like, what's my ass supposed to do to this music? So for me, rock I kind of define as something that gives your ass something to do. Yeah, Rolling Stones for sure. Again, all the Rolling Stones, you listen to their early stuff, what were they doing? They were doing remakes of some of the great rock and roll, quote unquote, blues music. And what does that mean? That means black musicians originally wrote those songs. And that means they brought some of that African, that rhythmic vibe into it. So I happen to like a rhythmic vibe. And fortunately, Uncle Butchie, even with the music we play, our whole thing is, if people can't dance to our music, let's not do that song. So I'm just, so I don't have a style of music. Again, I like it to be danceable when doing public performance. Where when I listen to music, or let's say when I'm doing massage. When I'm doing massage, I want music that has no rhythm at all. The last thing I want is somebody on a table trying to figure out what they're going to do with their hips. So for me, it has to be that kind of music that is quite dreamy and has no hip-catching rhythm to it. So if I'm doing body work, I like a different style of music than I would if I was out performing for people. So it's kind of situational. I occasionally like to listen to classical music. My favorite classical musician is J. Bach, Johannes Sebastian Bach, J.S. Bach, because he wrote such incredible bass lines. When I listen to the bass lines, not in the Brandenburg Concertos is all that horn music, not a good example of his bass work, but in so much of his music, his bass, the bass lines that he writes, the lines he writes for cello and the contrabass are just like, they're modern. It's like listening to Paul McCartney play. and you know, or like a melodic bass player that could be in the pocket. So Jorge, that was a 20-minute answer to your question about what style of music do I like. I'm going to put my exhaust fan on. It's almost silent. I also, I mean, since you're Jorge Rodriguez, I also enjoy Latin rhythms. I have one song that I wrote over 40 years ago that I call Mundo Mio, that has kind of works well with a salsa rhythm. And then I have another song that I'm working on that also kind of has like a samba rhythm, I think. I like rhythms, but in other words, I might like to take a rhythm from one genre, but do it like instrumentally, differently. You know, using instruments that might not be part of that genre. I do not, Oswald. I do not know the Cuban bass player Alain Perez. And it's also the interesting, like when I have gone on YouTube just to listen to who are the hot bass players, they're really well practiced and they're doing amazing things, but it's very solo-ish kind of for me. I like to play in an ensemble. I like to be one of the musicians, kind of creating a tapestry of music. And what's interesting is, you know, Butch Robbins, the man whose band I'm in, Uncle Butchie, he knows the whole Wooten family. He knows Victor Wooten personally. And he was joking because Victor Wooten has been having bass camps for some years now. And Victor said, you know, he goes, everybody has gotten so crazy and tapping and this, that, and the other thing. He goes, I'm going to set a rule where, you know, you got to at least do, you know, you have to like, I'm going to have like a class where you can only play whole notes. He said, you know, I feel responsible for it. He goes, you know, because I, you know, develop my own style. And then everybody, rather than Victor Wooten developed his own style. And, you know, he was a diligent practice, so he could do all kinds of wild stuff. Then other people come along, and what do? They develop Victor Wooten's style instead of their own style. And that's one of the things that is very popular these days. Is there's a lot of the music could be called archontic because it's all mimicry. I mean, you have to put in a fair amount of, you know, practice time to mimic people, but it's work rather than creativity. In other words, you give yourself a job rather than a trade. Oh yes, I do, Julie. I won't be in a band that doesn't play in 432. So I have a friend of mine, a guitar player, that I had played with a bit. We play in 432. There's another band that I play with a little bit. They play in 432. And Uncle Butch Robbins, when I met him, was doing 440. I introduced him to 432, and that was it. Not only did he feel it and like it, his banjo liked it. So yes, I feel just because the World Council, you know, whatever the World Council of Music changed the tuning, doesn't mean that we who tune our own instruments have to follow that. So I feel, you know, if art's going to be part of the road to the new paradigm, it's incumbent upon artists, especially in the case of musicians, to, like, you know, play music that speaks to our spirit and actually can talk to our bones and our cells. Because everything in our body is constructed with sacred geometry. Playing in 432 means that the frequencies coming out from all the things you're playing are formed in that sacred geometry. When you play in 440, the sounds coming out do not jive well with the sacred geometry. They're at a dissonance from it. And so it's, and I remember somebody saying that ever since, you know, because this is only, you know, we're only going back to like the late 30s and 40s of when all this change was made. And so prior to that, most orchestras were tuning to 432. And somebody who was an opera teacher, teaching opera students, is saying since the change of pitch, opera singers have much shorter careers. When one looks at the tiny increment in pitch that was made, because it was tiny, it was, you know, if you can look at the notes between the piano, it was 1/3 of a difference between two notes next to each other on a piano. In other words, if going from one note that's next to each other, okay, so again, there's black and white, but two of them are right next to each other, that's called a half step. And they break that down into 100 cents. The difference between, in other words, when you're going down from 440 to 432, you're going down 32 cents, roughly 1/3 of 100 cents. So it's a tiny increment. So it wasn't like that, that opera singers were straining their voice against this tiny increment. What it was now they were telling their vocal cords to produce sounds that were not organic. In other words, they weren't based in sacred geometry. Our vocal cords are based in sacred geometry. So producing notes that are not in resonance, that are in fact in dissonance with the geometry of your vocal cords, is going to create wear and tear that needn't be there. Hello, Connie. So, so yes, I do play in 432, and I encourage other musicians to do that so that we're part of making the world a better place. I mean, you know, there are endless things to go on, but for me, I mean, it sounded right. Most importantly, it felt right. And then also when I changed to, this was in 2010, I changed to 432 tuning. My songwriting is through the roof. I mean, I actually have to stop writing songs. I could write a song almost every time I strum my guitar, because songs started coming to me. Once I was in that tuning, it's like it opened up the muse world, and melodies just came pouring through. I mean, it was like, you know, once you're in that tuning, you tap into the music of the spheres. Yeah, digital, I mean, sure. Digital is going to, you know, reproduce to the best of its ability what it's given. It'll mimic it. So it does make a difference, for sure. Hello, Sam. Apparently one time somebody asked Prince about 432 tuning, and he said it's the gold standard. And it's even that's one of the reasons why I enjoy playing through a tube amp, because some of the effects that I'm you know, will be putting between my guitar signal and the final output of the tube might be digital. But because the last electronic thing to form the sound was analog, a tube, then it turns the whole signal analog. Even though it was fed a digital signal, it will burp out an analog signal. Yeah, I use snark. I mean, almost all of them do it now, but... Oh, where's my snark? I use this one. This is a snark. They're not all that expensive, and a lot of the tuners now will allow that. Let me go into my camera so I can make sure everybody can see it. And with the snark, what you do is you turn it on. This is the on-off. You might not be able to see it because the battery's dying. And then in the back, there's a round button, and that button then brings up, it says 440, and then there's up or down buttons, and you hit the down button until it gets to 432, and then you tune your guitar. So yeah, this Snark is a good brand. I mean, I'm not gonna say it's the only brand, but it's they're under $20, I think, and I get the chromatic tuners. And then there's also something called, I don't know if they still had it, it was an app. Before I got my tuner, there was an app I downloaded. It was called 7th String Tuner. And it enabled me to tune my guitars just by using my, like, in other words, using a mic. You could, any mic that you have, like, webcam mic or whatever, you play loud enough for the mic to hear it, and then then this 7-string tuner would allow you to tune it. I mean, you could tune, it had a drop-down menu for you to, or what you enter it in, whatever it is, but you could set the tuning for 432 and then just use, the mic on your webcam to become your tuner with the app. Hello, Zach. Yeah, that's the other thing. Both Android and Apple make tuning apps. I had a friend of mine who was a musician, but he had a tuning app on his smartphone. I knew what you meant. I didn't think it was fishy, Madfinger. But I also found that I have a marginal voice. I don't consider myself a singer, although I don't let that stop me. And but I have found that since since working with 432 that I tend to be more in tune. I'm less out of pitch in my singing, because that's actually probably the most crucial thing, is singing out of pitch. At least for my, to my musical ears, hearing somebody sing out of pitch is painful. So if I know that when I do hair play, I go, oh boy, you didn't make that one, you didn't make that one. Since I find it painful, I don't like to do to others what I don't like done to myself. But I kind of have my saying, hey, I don't have the greatest singing voice. It didn't stop Bob Dylan. And he got better over the years. Because if you stay at something, you get better at it. And being as I'm singing my own songs, what the heck? That's what I do. And oh yeah, I remember, so I was giving shout outs for content creators here. So I mentioned Speculum Niche, or Niche as we call her. I mentioned Saroth the Mage. I forgot to mention one of our people also from Scotland, I Walk. That's his YouTube channel, I Walk. And he's been putting out some wonderful songs. He sent me one that I intend to put a bass line to. I haven't done it yet, but I worked on it for about an hour the other night, and I think I have a good idea what I want to play to what he played, and then I'll send it to him, and should get it done this week. Maybe I'll put, if not play it on the next Can't You Hear Me Gnostic, the next Mystic Muse, which will be announced when it gets scheduled. And the MP3 he sent me to work with was in 432. I think some of his earlier stuff might not have been there, but when I mentioned to him, he goes, "Oh yeah, I'll do that." So at least he did. At least the one he sent me, he sent in 432. Plug away, Sarath. This, there's 21 people here. Well, if you take yourself out, there's 20 people here. And I would like them to know that you're streaming tomorrow. So by all means, please use this chat to communicate to other people in our community that you're doing a live stream. To me, the only thing that would ever be, rude is if somebody started a live stream during this one, comes into the chat and go, "Oh, live stream happening over here." That would be a little bit. I wouldn't lose my shit over it, because again, hey, if somebody else's live stream is more interesting than this one, I want you to go where you feel you want to be. I'm fine with people. If there's 2 live streams on and there's a choice to be made, which one you want to be, and a lot of it has not so much, because we can always watch these things in replay. So it's really who's going to be in a live chat. I totally get that. I totally get it. And I have zero issue with that. I think I think it would be rude to do that to somebody. But, again, I'll just be like, "Oh, it isn't exactly the, mannerly." But I would, be like, it is what it is. Because, it would speak more about the person doing it than anything else. But we don't have that here. So plug away. If anybody, if there's a live stream coming up, that's why I announced, 2 nights from now. I mean, Anish, I'm assuming you have a Nox Mente this week. I know you missed 1 week a few weeks ago, but I think generally every week at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, Nish and Jerry, that's Jerry Cthulhu, do Nox Mente. And they've had some really, really good guests. They've had some marginal guests on there, like me, but that happens once in a while. iWalk's music channel is iWalk. Sam Webster. Okay, so that's the 1 week that I taught. Right, okay. Yeah, I guess, well, Nisha, it kind of, when I say marginal, in many ways, there's a certain amount of also name recognition. So, you have Gordon White on, people know who Gordon White is. Randy Moggins, people know who he is. Carl, Greg Carlwood. If they don't know his name, they know THC for the higher side chats. Thank you, Nish. Gonna mute myself for 1 moment. I'm back. Yeah, Gordon White might be one of my favorite kind of magical shamanic people to listen to, because first of all, he's got a great intellect. His knowledge base runs deep, and he's conversant with his knowledge base. And he's playful, thoughtful, responsible, and is, just constantly kind of pushing the envelope, his own and then the collective envelope. Delightful man, smart man, erudite, and fun. I mean, Gordon. If I see anything with Gordon White that's on, I want to listen to it. and his and he tends to, he tends to pick good guests. He's had a few guests that kind of come on that are a little bit leaning into the social justice war. You can hear it in their language. And that's because usually they're young and fresh out of university, so they've just received a full plate of that kind of indoctrination. And it's sad to hear that creep into their studies. But again, you know, it's part of what we're dealing with during this time of change. I think there's only one person that actually was kind of hanging so much in that worldview that I did not finish the interview. But generally, Gordon keeps it real. Because he's aware of that. You know, he leans a little bit into that. But again, you know, I think there's a difference between where you might be personally, and then, you know, and then you're kind of sussing out yourself. And then, you know, certain people come on and it's kind of like a dogma with them. He's not so dogmatic. But I think it's fairly hard. I think it's fairly hard for somebody who calls himself a chaos magician to be too dogmatic about things, and that's what makes him so delightful. Do you get the idea? I like Gordon White. Yeah. The American universities, they're currently a concern, in my opinion. And somebody now, like another person I like a lot is Joseph Farrell, but I've listened to so much Joseph Farrell that I could finish a lot of his sentences for him. As brilliant as he is, you know, I mean, so, but I still, anything with Farrell, I will usually tune into. Good night, Niche. Yeah, Greg Carwell has a lot of interesting guests. And of course, one of my favorite guests to listen to is John Lamb Lash. But he hasn't done interviews, kind of like, he hasn't been doing the interview circuit. And he has a body of work. I mean, he has, you know, dozens of interviews out on the internet. And the Sophianic narrative doesn't change. So the work he put out, it still needs to be found, in my opinion. Okay, meandering mystic. Be well. And just in case anybody has not heard me say it before, there are 2 interviews with John Lash that were conducted by Lisa Harrison. They're a couple of years old now, and it's in 2 parts, and they really cover the Sophianic narrative, which you can also find on metahistory.org. The full narrative is written out there. But I kind of enjoy. I like John's delivery and voice. So if you're not aware of the Sophianic narrative, of that foundational mythos that is, in my opinion, the real creation story, you might want to check it out. It's in the description of every Can't You Hear Me Gnostic, the Lisa M. Harrison interviews with John Lamb Lash, the Gnostic teacher on the internet. I mean, it's so odd to know that Lisa, you know, and she also, after that, she did another interview. She's done like two, you know, different times, like a year later, she sat down and interviewed or spoke with John Lash. And it's just very interesting because, you know, if you listen to her lately and her Lilu stuff and other things, you know, basically she has some kind of AI communicating with her. Although supposedly it isn't. You know, but it's interesting. Oh, please do, Saroth. I mean, again, it's just know what is kind of the bedrock of Can't You Hear Me Gnostic, as far as like what's, you know, like what is, like when I say I comment from sitting in a Gnostic seat, as I like to call it. That's the bedrock. The Sophianic narrative is the bedrock. It is the story of our creation and the creation of the planet itself, the creation of the demiurge and the archons, the planets that that play so strongly in astrology. It's all there. And so when you get that narrative, you still have plenty of questions going forward, but a lot of the existential questions are satisfied. You kind of finally can get grounded and then get curious about questions of utility. Now, our who we are, the existential question, are the utmost utility. But the Sophianic narrative, for those of us who have heard it and said, yeah, that's it, probably the most important questions, who are we, why are we here, and all those things, are answered. Yes, Yaldabaoth is the proper name for the demiurge. I like to call him Yaldi sometimes. But he's also known as Jehovah and a few other. You know, again, if you're dealing with the personage that first arises, well, you know, I'd like to, you know, I can't, to be historically correct, I cannot say that the first instance of Yaldabaoth is in the Old Testament. I would say the first instance of Yaldabaoth shows up in the Zoroastrian religion. Yes. I mean, really, I'm going to talk to you, Sam. When you think about that, the word Satan means adversary. Okay, that's what the word means. That's what Satan is, an adversary. So when I look in, sitting in reality's seat at Yaldi in the Old Testament, there's humanity's adversary. I mean, you know, if Satan means adversary, and the adversary of humanity, well, let me tell you, the lawgiver, or the one who gave the law, I would call that a serious adversary. Yeah, Zoroastrian was very dualistic, but it introduced the sky god. Okay, that's where it all. I mean, again, the moment a belief system starts talking about sky gods, you know that Yaldi had got somebody's ear. It isn't part of our creation mythos. That is the intrusion. The intrusion into this beautiful dreaming that we live in comes from the heavens. Oswald, the answer is the Mandala Effect Decoded is the name of the YouTube channel that he puts them up. Ginny Thwaite, Thwaite, mirrors all of his videos, and so does a gentleman called Hans Carlson, but I forget if that's one N or two N's. But the Mandala Effect Decoded, that's the name of John Lamb Lash's YouTube channel. Yeah, the intrusion into our reality by the demiurge and his archon. The one of the things I do enjoy about Miguel. I mean, I like Miguel O'Connor. I like him. I don't like him calling the Earth a crappy little planet. And there are a few other places. I think he, as somebody who's calling himself a Gnostic and has had John Lamb Lash as a guest, some of the zigs and zags he do, I have to wonder where he's going. But I like the man. I definitely like him. And one of the things I like when he goes, and Jehovah and his angelic mafia. I love that, because that really about sums it up. It's kind of like there's a boss, and he's got his wise guys, and that's that's where the whole archangel thing comes from. The whole archangel thing comes from the archons. So that's why when I hear people dabbling in magics that kind of work with that stuff, I'm like, hopefully it won't bite you in the ass. And then one of the funniest stories is somebody who went down to Peru or something to do ayahuasca. I forget who it was. It's a name actually I should remember, because it's a name I think we all know. And so he does a trip, and he's being overseen by the shaman. And he goes, and he comes out, and the shaman says, how was your journey? And he goes, it was amazing. I finally understand, how I have the answers now about where we come from, because I met these dragon type beings, and they told me about how they created us, and and the kind of something probably more akin to what this Sumerian creation story as opposed to the Genesis creation story. That's funny, Oswald. So anyway, so this, he's gushing about these stories they tell him, and the shaman starts to laugh. And he goes, "What are you laughing at?" He goes, "Oh, they tell that same story to everybody. Because they lie, that's just a bunch of lies. They will tell that to anybody who will believe them." And so the important thing was, that when you do these entheogens, or sacred medicine plants, you're going into a world that it's kind of like going into the ocean. You're going to meet nice friendly fish, and you're going to meet some sharks. Except on in that dimension, sharks can take the appearance of nice cuttlefish. Cuddle, not cuddle. Cuttlefish, which are a form of squid. Well, yes, the mushrooms will lie. I mean, again, what they do is they take you into that domain. So once you kind of land there, you're going to have to know some of the critters. And that's why it's very good to have experienced shaman to come back and unpack, these little gifts you've been given, because sometimes you're given time bombs. And that's one of the things where if you've been grounded in a Sophianic narrative, know that this is your planet, and who you really are, and go into that world as a sovereign being, with the power of your imagination to wield. You'll be fine. Yeah, because they'll sometimes if they can't con you, then they'll try to make themselves look like some big bad dragon. So whatever size dragon they show you, double your own size. I mean, yeah, it gets a little goofy. They get bigger and you get bigger. It's like, and then, but it's you get, the other thing to do is laugh at them. Oh, they don't like that at all. That usually make them scoot. And you can do a lot of journey, a lot of shamanic journeying can be done in the non-astral body, and that makes it a little bit safer. The astral body can get messed up, but using I would call your imagination body, you can do a lot of work that you won't end up tearing your etheric sheath doing. And last night while I was going to sleep, I had kind of entered an environment, and suddenly a hole appeared in the ground. But it was like almost like a sewage drain. Let's say about that wide in diameter. What's that? 4 or 5 inches. But for some reason, I can't recall all of the dream, but something that I wanted to take hold of or something disappeared down that hole. So I made myself smaller, wrapped myself in a little bit of a sheath, and dove in and chased it. And actually it seemed to me that was the main thing, because when I first went, well, that hole's too small. It's filled with sewage. But right away, I made myself smaller and wrap my put a little like kind of a etheric casing around myself, and dove in and was able to go as far as I wanted to. And it seemed like that was actually the lesson to get me to understand that when I encounter obstacles like that, change form. If it seemed like I was jumping into a cesspool, even in your etheric form, the idea of like swimming in crap is, even though you're small enough to swim into a sewer pipe, isn't very appealing. So you kind of put the equivalent of a membrane around yourself, where you kind of have your own little bubble, and the poop doesn't touch you. So we're coming to the end of 2 hours, and I'll probably, manage to make this work. Have a nice little get-together and gathering. I think the energy overall, an etheric condom works well. Yes, Matt Finger. I really enjoyed the atmosphere of the chat, and the contributions from everybody in the chat. I want to, I'm really very thankful for a thoughtful and interactive chat that we all partook in, including myself. And just the people who show up, but most, I just really would ask anybody that does not know when I use the word Sophianic narrative, or the Sophianic creation story, or the Sophianic mythos. And again, a mythos is a way of transmitting information. A myth is not a lie. A myth is a form of transmitting information. And very often, look at the story I just spoke about in my kind of shamanic space of diving down a 4-inch in diameter sewer hole. All right. Now, if it had some import to it, it could find its way into a report that would be in a kind of a mythical setting, and it would sound like complete bullshit. A human being can't jump into a 4-inch sewer hole without getting sick, and they wouldn't fit. And again, that would make sense in our reality. But we're transdimensional, we're multidimensional. So we have the natural world, and then the world that sits above it, and the word for above is super. So above the natural is the supernatural, just as natural, just slightly different. And in that setting, you can turn yourself into something small, wrap yourself in an etheric condom, and dive down a sewer hole. So now so that's why sometimes like the Sophianic narrative mythos though is not filled with much in the way of fantastic. A lot of the indigenous mythos will have some fantastic agents. Sometimes more of the cultural mythos. They like to make their heroes more heroic. If somebody caught they might say, oh, they caught a fish so large they fed a village. And, you might figure, oh man, that must be a big fish. Well, what if the village had 10 people in it? Wouldn't need such a big fish. And it would be true. Caught a fish and fed the entire village for a meal. So, I mean, there's, but please, one of the things that the archontification of language has done is made the word myth synonymous with a lie or something untrue. And nothing could be further from the truth than a myth is a lie. A myth is a storytelling, information transmitting motif or modality. That's what a myth is. So I guess I'll close on that. Boom. So good night to all. And I would encourage anybody to at least listen to part 1. My thing is, if you make it through part 1, or if you don't make it through part 1, you certainly don't want to listen to part 2. If you do make it through part 1, the chances are you can't wait to start part 2. And I would tend to go and listen and hear, as opposed to saying, he said this, how does this compare with mine? Take in all of the story. Take in all of the narrative, and then see how that felt. How does that feel? In other words, if you were to embrace this narrative, what kind of reality setting does that put you in, and how does it feel to be in that reality setting? So yes, I'm going to look right down. Because I can look right where it is, and so I have it written: for the most concise telling of the Sophianic mythos / narrative, listen to these 2 shows with Lisa Harrison here, and then it says part 1 and part 2. So I would recommend starting with part 1, because that's kind of how it's set up to be listened to. I think they're about 45 minutes each. They could be longer. But, you're going to, and I just would say, give it a chance to develop. It's going to take you in. We live in a narrative already. We live in a narrative shaped largely by the religions, because the law followed Torah. Got more complex, but followed it. Yes, I am talking about the JLL material. The Lisa Harrison interview is her interview with John Lamb Lash. I will add that to my description. I'll put his name in there so we know who the interview is with. A little oversight on my part. And again, allow the narrative to be told, because you're going to need enough of it to be able to give this other reality a step into and see what that's like for you. Biodynamic lemonade. All right, everybody. So thank you very much. I'd like to give you one of these acknowledgments. And John Lash, if you happen to listen to this show, love to you, brother. Thank you for all the work you do and have been doing over the decades. All right. So I'm going in and stopping my streaming. Thank you all again, and I'll see you next week, same time, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Can't You Hear Me, Gnostic? And maybe this week I'll get out either my other the false chronology, or a mystic muse, and we'll talk some music and gear and all that kind of good stuff. All right? My love and respect to you all.